Have you ever wondered to yourself if two planes have ever collided mid-air? Well, sure they have. A bunch of times actually. They usually all have the same outcome. If the crew aren't killed instantly in the collision, they're killed when the now smashed aircraft plummets to the ground. What makes today's topic unique is that these two planes merged together after colliding in the air, and they were still functional. Well, sort of. In the year 1940, the world was in the midst of the Second World War. As part of the Allied war effort, the Empire Air Training Scheme had been set up, with the aim of training aircrewmen from the Royal Air Force, the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm, the Royal Australian Air Force, the Royal Canadian Air Force, and the Royal New Zealand Air Force. The Empire Air Training Plan remains one of the largest aviation training programs in history. Enrolled in the Australian wing of this program were 22-year-old Leonard Fuller and 19-year-old Jack Hewson. They were stationed at Forest Hill, a newly built airbase near the city of Wagga Wagga in New South Wales, Australia. Now, before we all laugh at the people living in a city named Wagga Wagga, its original inhabitants were Aboriginal Australians, and it's believed the name originates from their language and translates loosely to place of many crows. So there's an interesting bit of history there. It's not just a funny sounding name. Not that I, as an Irishman, am in any position to make fun of place names. Look at this! Can you even pronounce that? The Welsh are even worse for this shite. Assumedly the English robbed all their vowels. On the 29th of September, Fuller and Hewson would take part in a cross-country training exercise that would see them fly to a couple of towns in the area before returning to Forest Hill. To do this, they were each assigned a British twin-engined Avro Anson and a navigator. By the way, this is pronounced Dunleary. I wasn't really going to leave you hanging on that. This one, yeah, I don't have a fucking clue. Not long after taking off from Forest Hill, Fuller and Hewson were passing above Brocklesby, a small town best known for this incident and literally nothing else. Fuller led Hewson, and at an altitude of about 1,000 feet, or 300 metres, the two made a banking turn. Fuller lost sight of Hewson during this manoeuvre, as Hewson went from behind Fuller's craft to beneath it. Then, the two planes slammed together. Fuller's belly came down on top of Hewson, the Anson's propellers chewing into his plane. However, instead of immediately coming apart and crashing, the two planes found themselves lodged together. Miraculously, of the two pilots and two navigators, only Hewson had been hurt. His back had been injured when Fuller's propellers cut into his fuselage, but he was not gravely wounded. You may have seen car accidents where a driver emerges from a complete wreck somehow unscathed and walks away. Unfortunately, the airmen could not afford this luxury as their wreck was in the sky. And you can't walk away from anything in the sky, because there's nothing to walk on. They had to make it to land for that, and that's usually where plane crashes go bad. Fuller's engines had been completely knocked out in the collision, but amazingly Hewson's craft was still operating at full power. Unfortunately, there wasn't much Hewson could do. He couldn't steer his plane. Fuller then realised that although his plane was dead weight, he could still control the flaps while he piggybacked on Hewson. He could effectively steer the combined craft as long as he remained latched onto Hewson's plane. Realising he was the only one with any control over the current situation, Fuller told the other crewmen to bail. He himself would stay on board the craft to ensure it wouldn't end up crashing into Brocklesby below and killing residents or destroying their homes. Hewson and the two navigators jumped to safety. Fuller now guided the conjoined planes away from the populated area below and began trying to head back to Forest Hill. He would never make it though, as the bottom planes started to lose power. He had to find a spot to make an emergency landing. This would be no easy task, considering he would basically be landing a plane he wasn't even sitting in, and if the two planes came unstuck as he wrestled with the controls, he was in serious trouble. He found a large open field and began circling it to make his landing. He made his descent, and when the two planes touched down, they slid way across the field before coming to a stop. Both planes were still completely wedged together, and Leonard Fuller was unharmed. Even he was surprised at the miracle landing, commenting that it was one of the smoothest landings he'd ever made. The freak accident and miraculous recovery made headlines around the world, casting a spotlight on the small town of Brocklesby, in which now stands an Avro Anson engine as a monument to the incident. Fuller was commended for his presence of mind, courage and determination in risking his own life to ensure not only was nobody else injured, but that the two aircraft were not completely destroyed. Both planes were able to be repaired, saving about $2 million in today's money. Fuller was promoted to sergeant, although he was also docked a week's pay and confined to barracks for 2 weeks for speaking about the incident to newspapers without authorization. Jack Hewson was treated for his injuries and made a full recovery. Both pilots graduated the following month and went on to active service. Sadly, in 1944, Leonard Fuller was killed when he was hit by a bus while out on his bike. In fact, Hewson's navigator Hugh Fraser was also killed shortly after when his Lockheed Hudson collided with a tree during a training mission in Northern Ireland in 1942, killing him and his 3 crewmen. This means that despite coming from the opposite side of the globe, he is now buried not too far away from me. It also means that 2 out of the 4 men who survived this incredible accident, which is a one of its kind as far as I'm aware, died just a few years later in separate collisions and more mundane circumstances. I mean, mundane isn't really a suitable word for any fatal crash, but to have piloted this to safety, only to be killed by a bus 4 years later, seems to me like a strange twist of fate. They didn't even live to see the end of the war. But that's how these videos go. Sometimes they start off good and end up bad. Sometimes they start off bad and end up good. A lot of times they start off bad and end up worse. That's just life, I suppose. However your day may have started, I hope it ends up good. Maybe my video may have even helped with that, and if that's the case, why not consider subscribing? That way I can give you the happy ending every week. But not that kind. I don't do that. Buy my merch.